My name's Roxanna Minnona, and I come from Byron Bay, Australia. But mostly I spend my time traveling the world, sharing very intimate, profoundly life-changing retreats and workshops and courses and sessions, mainly with women and also with men. Um, and I just really want to thank you, Paula, for taking the time to spend with me here today and capture some of what we've been talking about on film, because what's becoming more and more evident to me over the last 15 years of sharing this work around the world is how important it is. It's so fundamental. It's really at the heart of everything. Um, the work is very direct and very deep. And what I see is so important for us right now is to have a really deep connection to who we really are. And why I approach this from the standpoint of addressing sexuality is because sex is the energy that created us. And sex is this, the energy of sex is our life force energy. So anywhere that we have an issue with this energy, anywhere that we're having an issue with sex, and an issue with sex may be something that we may never think of it as an issue or relate to it as an issue, but I'm saying it's an issue because anything that keeps us away from who we are, anything that divorces us from our natural, beautiful expression of our life force energy is an issue in my point of view. And it's such a crisis at this point in time on the planet. We have had so many generations or thousands of years of confusion around sex, and a lot of this comes through societal conditioning and religion and oppression and different social norms and so on. And understanding, liberating, healing, and awakening and restoring a natural alignment with this life force sexual energy is crucial for our spiritual work, and is crucial just for the simple enjoyment of your beautiful life. The work I do comes under the umbrella of the title A Tantric Life. And a tantric life really just means living in tune with your natural life force. Living a tantric life really just means living a beautiful life, being who you are authentically. And so when we address sex, we are addressing the essence of who we are. It's really an interesting thing, you know, I've seen a lot over the years. I've been holding workshops pretty much non-stop for the last 15 years around the world. And so I've been exposed to a lot. I hear a lot of women's stories. I work very deeply with people in a very direct and a very beneficial, a very impactful kind of a way. And so there's a lot of themes that I see repeating, rising up over and over again. And these are some of the things that I'd like to share a little bit with you today so that you can go away from watching this and really have some tools that you can start to address your own inner work with immediately. So I'll just give you a little bit of background about me and how I got into this work. It started out really young, and it was very unexpected. I had some major obstacles in my teenage years that led me to serious drug abuse, which I was in recovery from around the age of 17, attending rehab prior to my high school certificate. So I had like very intense, life-changing crises very early on. And these experiences led me to understand a lot about the way things really work and the way that society is designed to systematically program us, and the way that the way that it's mostly set up, particularly in the Western cultures, is really actually in what I will term as not fit for human consumption. A lot of the ways that the society is set up actually in no way works for the people who are a part of that society. And doing our inner work or our spiritual work, however you want to refer to that, is very essential in order to really find your true sovereignty and live according to your design, to live according to your own natural life force energy as your inner compass, as your inner guide as to how to really live here on this planet, and to live in a way that is really enjoyable for you because you're fulfilled by being who you are naturally rather than who you've been conditioned into being or programmed into being. So these experiences were really destabilizing for me earlier in my life and forced me to have to really investigate myself very deeply in order to find stability inside to recover from the drug abuse. And that took me on this radical healing process that by the age of 21, I was living a very non-conventional life because I was so devoted to my healing that everything else kind of fell to the background. And all that really mattered to me each day was that I was doing what was really true to me because I needed to live that way in order to stay alive. It was quite a critical time where a lot of the people that I was associated with were dying from overdoses and so on. So it was a very isolating experience, and it initiated me into some very profound spiritual awakenings. So at the age of 21, it was really clear that I wanted to partake in something that had meaning and that was sacred and that was like an initiation for me out of childhood and into adulthood and into a life that was resonant with my heart and being. And through this rites of passage that I did, I had uncovered a certain kind of quality that was reflected by the other women that were part of this initiation experience. And they reflected back to me that I carried like this quality of like a sacred sexual temple dancer, and to me it was quite okay. I could resonate with that, but I, for the most part, was really functioning in a very unconscious way around my sexuality at that time, and the way that most Western women function in their sexuality. Because, let me start off by saying this much. The woman, in terms of the energetics, and everything in this universe is just energy. And when we understand that we're really just living in an energy world, we have a lot more access to what I'll call the inner plane. So in looking at a woman from the perspective of the energetics, she is representing feminine energy. And the feminine energy is like, it's a container. It takes everything into itself. It absorbs, it contains, it holds, it carries. And we see this like demonstrated in the way that the woman carries a child. That she feeds life, she births life, she nurtures life. So because the woman is by nature very receptive, whatever's going on for a woman is quite often really just a reflection of the environment of which she is a part of. And this is where our inner work is so important, because we need to really start to go in and realign ourselves to our energy rather than all of the energies that we absorb into us and that influence us so heavily. So if a woman is unconscious, then she's really going to be expressing her sexuality in a lot of the ways that the culture prescribes to her. And it prescribes this through media, through movies, through everything that's kind of around us, through advertising. And what we see happening mostly in the Western culture, for the most part, is the objectification of female bodies. and the objectification of sex. So in other words, sex sells. Everyone in marketing knows this is like, you know, the golden rule, sex sells. So at a certain time, at a certain point in the woman's evolution, and when she's looking around her to what to model, what are her role models, how does she model herself as a woman, and she looks in the magazines, and she looks in the television, and she looks, you know, to her peers, and she looks to the fashion, or she looks to movies, and what she's seeing reflected back to her is this objectification of the body, to wear what I call to wear the sex on the outside. So the Western women will typically give off a lot of sexual energy, but be unaccountable for that. So she may get a lot of attention back, and then it's like, well, what are you looking at? You know, it's like there is no recognition of what she's sending out being equivalent to what's coming back. And a lot of different ideas are fed into the woman, like, well, you're entitled to express yourself. Feminism says that you can now do whatever you like, regardless of the consequences. And we have a right to wear mini skirts and crop tops and whatever it might be, you know. And I'm not making any of this wrong. We just need to have a look at that to understand how it is that we may come to find ourselves functioning like this. And then we can start to question whether, well, is that really truly how the energy moves me? And how does my energy truly want to be expressed? And what does that really feel like inside of me? And can I be 100% accountable for that? So at about the age of 21, when these in this sacred initiation ceremony that I partook in, these women reflected back to me that they saw that I carried a wisdom or a gift around sacred sexuality, and particularly around dance. And so I took that on board, and I began to question a lot of things about myself and my sexuality, and I became passionately interested in delving into that and really knowing that, really awakening to, okay, who am I as a sexual woman? And so shortly after, along with many meditation courses and different workshops and seminars and so on, I found myself exploring my sexuality in the realms of an erotic dance environment in a very prestigious club. And it was a really interesting discovery for me. I went there purely for the purposes of wanting to be in an environment where I could be as external with my sexuality, and it was completely not only okay, but invited. It was what was required of me, in fact, in those environments. And the gift of being able to express myself in that way was that I got to put it all on the table and really just see it for what it was, see it for all the manipulation, see it for all of the ways that it had been molded to use it and to misuse it, and so on and so forth. And underneath all of these layers of expression, there was also a very true, elegant flame that burned that I made contact with inside. And when I made contact with that flame, I went through a radical change. I went through a radical physical change, and I went through a radical change around my sense of self and my sense of self-confidence, my sense of knowing who I am. It was the flame of transformation. And it was the story of the ugly duckling that came out as the swan. Because as I began to dance, I began to fall in love with myself. I began to see myself. And as I saw myself, I had compassion for everything. I had compassion for, as I had compassion for myself, I had compassion also for everyone who was in those environments with me. For all the games, for all the bitchiness, for all the customers, for their rude remarks, for the objectification, for all of it. I saw it all, and I could accept it all somehow. And then inside of that acceptance, I also made, I became aware that that environment was actually an ancient, like, realm, you could say. That behind these black doors was this realm that we were dancing in all night. that was like from another time. And I got a glimpse into what the Kama Sutra temples, what the Devadasis, the temple dancers. I understood the deeper spiritual significance of those roles at a time in humans' evolution. And it really awoke something in me. And what started to happen, which was quite profound, was that a lot of the customers who would come to these clubs would they could book you for an hour for a dance, or they could book you for a few hours, whatever it may be. It was a very clean club. There was no prostitution taking place, sexual prostitution. It was really just the dancing. But what would happen was I would get many repeat customers who would come and book me for the entire night, mainly just to sit and talk with me, to talk about the difficulties that they were having in their relationships, and the difficulties they were having around their true nature as men, their enjoyment of beauty, their enjoyment of a woman, and how devastating it was that the woman that they loved the most, they could never be this intimate with. And it touched something very deep in me. My time in there was short-lived, and after I left, something quite phenomenal started to happen. I never woke up one morning and thought to myself, well, gee, I would really love to spend my life working with women around sexuality. That sounds like loads of fun. No, those thoughts never ever entered my mind. And because I was so devoted to my own healing process, I never even really considered myself in a position to be able to give something of value in any sense. However, beyond my control, I started to have certain meditations which were quite profound, and I was receiving very strong messages. And these were not messages I was seeking. These messages started coming to me, and they were telling me, well, you're going to travel the world, and you're going to be teaching women about sexuality, and you're going to be speaking to millions of people about this. And I couldn't relate to it, because apart from my own internal healing process, it was never something that I had studied. I never studied how to be a teacher. I never studied how to facilitate workshops. I never studied any lineage of tantra. So I in no way felt qualified in a conventional sense. However, these meditations were coming to me, and at the same time, women started to approach me and ask me to assist them to learn how to dance erotically. And I found this request a little absurd, because although I'd had experience with it, through my experience, there was never any like lessons of how to be a stripper, or how to, sell your dance to a client or anything like this. It was really something that arose from the source of me. I discovered it in my transformational process inside of that place. But then reflecting on their request, it occurred to me that, well, of course, I could take them through a process of unleashing their inner erotic dancer and assisting them to kind of put all their sexual energy on the table and become more conscious of what it is and how they're using it, and how to claim back that energy so that they could embody it and dance it, as it were. And so Dancing the Divine was born. And this was a beautiful creation that literally birthed through me, despite me, despite whether I wanted it to or not. It was almost like, okay. And I was 22, so it was quite an overwhelming thing to suddenly have, a workshop full of women from ages 20 to 70. And here I am teaching about sexuality, and I felt like I really knew nothing. But what was profound was that when I would go into that space and be open and available to respond to what the women were asking of me, this profound wisdom and would come pouring through. So much so that I was also benefiting from the work. And so it just continued, and it continued to grow, and other women continued to share it and invite me to different countries. And of course, before you knew it, I was traveling the world teaching women about sexuality. And I would probably say I've learned the most from my own workshops. And these are some of the things I'd like to share with you now. Addressing our sexuality is so fundamental to our spiritual work. Let me explain to you why. There's this kind of idea that, you know, if you're really spiritual, you're really loving and you're really peaceful and it's really white light and everything's sweet and roses. But actually, the spiritual work that I'm talking about is one that requires us to go into the shadows. It requires us to go down into the roots, downwards, dirty and dark. And that is necessary in order to claim our full self. The spiritual work that I see as being important at this point in time on the planet is about waking up inside of the environments that we are in. In other words, waking up inside of the political environments, the environmental environments, the climatic environments, the economic environments, the social environments, on and on. It's like, how do you wake up in this modern world? So I'm in no way talking about a spirituality that's off in a cave somewhere seeking enlightenment, that you come back to this world and you still can't function, you know. It's about how do you really become conscious as to who you are right here, right now on the planet. And a lot of the spiritual practices that are offered are very beautiful. But we also have to look at them in the context that, for example, for the woman in particular, is that most of them have been created by men many thousands of years ago in environments that had very different, let's say, stresses or impacts on the individual undertaking the spiritual path. And so they were created by men for men on a spiritual path. Some of them were created by women for women, but even still, those women had very different lifestyles to what the modern woman has today, with trying to keep a career and her study and being a mother and be a lover and be a great wife. I mean, she's wearing like just 5 hats right there. And that can send you kind of a little crazy, to say the least. And then on top of that, you have tremendous amount of stress. If you turn on the television, it's, you know, a constant stress of threats to our lives, to our safety, the law, the war and terror, and so on and so forth. This is like a bombardment to the system, the stress of traffic, the stress of pollutants in our food and air and water, the stress of financial obligations. It just goes on. And none of this isn't even beginning to look at the stress of the inner work, the traumas, the childhood wounds, the past lives, whatever it may be. So for a woman to have like a spiritual practice and then all these other aspects of her life, the spiritual practice, we need to look at, well, what is the role of the spiritual practice? Is it just to make her feel good about the madness that she's living in? Is that really spiritual work? You know, okay, I run into my yoga class, I skid onto the mat, I do my 24 asanas, and then I'm like in the car in traffic, on the phone, preparing dinner for the family. I mean, it's a lot to juggle. And how much can she really give herself to her spiritual work with everything else being so demanding upon her? So this brings me back to the value and importance of addressing sexuality as the key to our spiritual practice, and especially for women. Why? Because you could say, and this may come as a shock, but sex is really a woman's thing. Because sex is really a way that the woman can maintain herself spiritually and psychologically and physically if approached consciously and in a way that works for her. It's such a deep aspect of who she is and how she functions. And this is the kinds of stuff that I go into in great detail during my courses with the women. And then I go into this with the women so that they can begin to bring this knowing and wisdom and experience into their relating, so that the relating can start to become more beautiful. And then also out of that, the men can start to do what they need to do to take care of their spiritual work. I've covered quite a few topics. I've just introduced quite a few topics there. And, you know, when we start talking about sex, we can just pretty much go anywhere. There's a lot to share. So I just want to finish off on my one statement of why it's so important to address the sexuality. And that is because in order to wake up inside of this condition that we find ourselves in this body, in this life here right now, that requires a fair amount of energy. Some of the holding patterns, some of the traumas, some of the contractions in the body, some of the shutdownness. That could be personal, it could be genetic, it could be generational. Either which way, it's very deeply rooted. And in order to shift through some of these blockages, if you like, or patterns, to have the commitment to that, to have the willingness to that, and to have the resource to do that, it requires a lot of energy. And sex is in the body, and it is the most powerful energy available to us. And this is essentially what the Taoists understood, the female sexual Taoist practitioners, is that when we awaken or liberate or unleash our sexual energy, if we want to, we can use that energy for our spiritual work. In other words, we can take the lowest vibration and raise it up into the higher centers to open them, to open the heart, to open the third eye, to open the crown, and to really do our spiritual work. But it's this resource of the sexual energy that we have available to us for this work. A woman is capable of being in an orgasmic state pretty much throughout her whole day, every day, without it involving any kind of intercourse or any other person, or masturbation, or anything else at all. I came to discover this through working with my teacher, Shantam Nityama, who is a world-renowned catalytic spiritual mentor and a master of sexual energy, and you could say tantric master, but essentially a master of energy. And it was through my initiations with him and working very closely with him and receiving mentoring from him that this natural state of being was very quickly restored, because it's natural. It's within all of us. It's not something that you have to learn. You actually need to start unlearning all of the things that prevent you or hold you back or shut you down from being in that state. People sometimes ask me for techniques, or how do I do this, or how do I channel the energy for my spiritual work, and so on. It's really not that complicated. If it were, I would probably be no good at it. It's actually just inbuilt inside of the intelligence in your body. It's actually inbuilt inside of the intelligence of your energy, of your orgasmicness. And so it's really just allowing yourself to surrender and to feel. And when we really give ourselves to this life force, to this life, and become an availability to this life, well, that already is orgasmic, because it's so fulfilling to have life moving through you so unencumbered, so openly, and so honestly, regardless as to what it might look like to people who are watching you from the outside. But when you fall in love with yourself, whatever kind of difficulties or issues or reactions people may have to you being in love with you and open to you and just emanating how life is having its way with you right in this moment without interfering with anybody else, then really it's none of our business what another person may think about what you're experiencing. Is it not even any of your business what you think about what you're experiencing? And see, this is really part of the process, is learning how to come away from the mind. When you ask the question, how can I use this sexual energy to channel it into my spiritual work? There's really nothing for you to do so much as kind of manipulating or interfering with your own natural currents. Leave that to what I'll call God. And I have in no way mean that in the religious context. I just mean leave that to the greater, leave that to your higher self. Leave that to the intelligence of your body. Your job is to stay present. The more you can allow yourself to relax into yourself and just stay present with whatever arises for you, the energy itself is the spiritual work. So what I mean by that is, let's say bliss. Bliss starts to expand and open up inside the body. And bliss is an all-encompassing experience where if you are angry, stressed, sad, confused, whatever it may be, happy, bliss embraces all of that, and it moves through the body in a wave, like an orgasmic wave. And what happens is that bliss is a kind of a frequency of our energy. Bliss is constantly attempting to grow. So it will come up against whatever block or whatever holding pattern, whatever thought patterns are being held into the body. And it will come up against those blocks with an intelligence that presses there, calling all of your awareness into that place with your breath. And as you surrender and open to whatever that is about and allow yourself to feel whatever that is about and allow it to have sound, express it, it becomes an orgasm because it's just energy. Wherever we contracted or wherever we're holding is really just where we have clenched around the natural flow of energy. So we've put an inhibition on it. So as you start to feel it and acknowledge it for what it is, without judging it, you liberate a lot of energy. And that energy is just orgasmic. And so the bliss is kind of constantly in this process of pressing up against the tight places in order to open out and liberate the body of anything that is unlike love. Anything that is in no way originating from the source of who you are. In other words, anything that you have taken in your life. Now the bliss is there, attempting to clear more space for more bliss to come. So it's this constant dance of opening and expanding more and more with this bliss. So this becomes a very beautiful state. It becomes a very high frequency that if we allow ourselves to stay suspended in that frequency for extended periods of time, it kind of washes the psyche, if you like. It kind of cleanses the psyche and cleanses the subconscious and cleanses the womb and cleanses the whole body of all kinds of toxins on a physical level. Emotionally, it liberates any heavy emotions that we may be carrying around, any burdens, any chip on the shoulder. All of this bliss is going to address and work into all of those areas. That's kind of like the experiential side of it. That's kind of like the practice, if you like, if you could call it that, if you could call life a practice. And then on the other hand, we want to investigate. We want to start to investigate things. We want to investigate our belief systems, our limiting ideas about ourselves, about life, about everything. We want to start to investigate even that just because we're having a thought, what makes it your thought just because it's in your head? How many of our thoughts have been implanted, or we've picked them up, or they're other people's ideas that we've adopted, or that we've been sort of spoon-fed through our education system and through the media and from the government or wherever we're getting the source of information. So we want to start to really investigate what of these things are genuinely my own thoughts, and do they work for me? do they work for me? Like, are they in alignment with who I am? Am I thriving as a result of maintaining all of these different ideas? This is kind of the spiritual work we want to do. And when the bliss is buzzing in our body and our hearts are really open, and we're maintaining high frequencies, we have more resource available for us to really go into some of these darker places, or some of these more deeply rooted, more attached ideas and energies, and really begin to have a stronger willingness and dedication to investigating them. Bliss is natural and it's inherent in all living beings, all living things. It's kind of like we're swimming in bliss. It's kind of like a fish in the ocean kind of going, where's the water? You know, I'm starved for water. And it's like, okay, that's a confused fish. And this is kind of how we are for the most part, kind of walking around here thinking, well, I need a relationship. I need my soulmate because I need to express my innermost sacred self. That's an interesting idea. Not one that I personally adopt. And especially when the more you allow yourself to open to the bliss that's buzzing in every cell of your body, you realize that the relating then just actually becomes an opportunity to share more who you are, rather than requiring it in order to experience these parts of yourself. So the bliss is there and it's in everything. And it really is connected to the breath. And it's the kind of breath that when we stop controlling it, the breath starts to breathe you. And in the same way is that when you stop controlling yourself or shutting yourself down automatically and unconsciously, the bliss starts to live you. How it looks inside of a woman can be different to how it looks inside of a man. Simply because the way that the man is wired is kind of the polar opposite to the way the woman is wired. The man is representing masculine energy and the woman is representing feminine energy in gender. And of course we have both masculine and feminine energies within us. But this is kind of already starting to almost sound complicated and technical. And it really is a lot more simple than that. There's also a dynamic that happens when a man and a woman come together and how the two energies or the dynamics interact with each other. Or if it's two women coming together, one is bringing more masculine energy, one more feminine. It's always needed. Opposites attract. So you can look at everything from the energy level and it will make a lot of sense. The beautiful thing about working with the bliss in the body is that the body never lies. So we can walk around in our life thinking, well, I'm really open and I'm really a sexual person and I'm really okay with these certain things and so on. Okay, let's see what the body has to say about that. And this is where living in alignment with your body becomes your greatest ally, because your body's constantly communicating to you. It's really just a process of how do we get in alignment with that and start to listen to that language, because it's attempting to guide us towards what works best for us. And we're all unique. All of our systems, all of our bodies are wired uniquely. The way we operate, how much sleep we need, what kind of food we need, all of this is very unique to each person. So it's really our job, each of us, is to really get in alignment with the body. So the different ideas that we may have about things are inconsequential, really. And I can share with you like my own experience a little bit when I came to meet Nityama. Because for 5 years I had already been teaching these workshops, the Dancing Divine courses for women. And when I came to meeting Nityama, I thought that I kind of knew a lot about sex and a lot about femininity. And of course, I had experienced many things and was teaching very profound workshops. So of course, there was some level of innate wisdom. But meeting Nityama was incredibly humbling because he was the first person I'd met, who happened to be a man, that really understood so much about the woman that I had never knew. It's so much about female sexual energy that I never knew was possible. And in the first workshop that I did with him, and I saw a woman in an orgasm for 2 or 3 hours, and you know, he could have done that just from looking at her. He did it through just a very few simple techniques that he uses, but through accessing the energetics. And as I saw this woman, I had a deep knowing that, all my life, I knew that there was something more. But because I'd never experienced it, I had just kind of covered it over as like a distant possibility. And in that very moment, I realized I was coming home. The dance between a man and a woman sexually is occurring all the time. It's in a conversation. There's a continuous ebb and flow between the yin and yang principle. And this is the electricity that is buzzing all around us all the time. So if a man really, I say, does his spiritual work and really reclaims his sexual energy and really heals any traumas that he may have around his masculinity, any shame, guilt that he may carry around the masculine, relating to his father, lack of role models, whatever it may be, the wounding with his mother. At the point in which the man has really come to terms with all of his wounds and his childhood issues, he connects to why he's on the planet. In other words, what's his purpose? What is he passionate about? What is the essence of him? What is he here to do? What is he bringing? What is the godliness, the consciousness in him about? When he connects to that, the way in which he interacts with a woman, from a conversation through to sexual intercourse, becomes of a whole different nature, because it's for a whole different purpose. And that purpose is a very deeply spiritual component, and it can be in just a moment, or it can be in a lifelong partnership. Still, the way he interacts is always in integrity with his being as a law unto himself. So there's a very interesting dance that happens between the masculine and feminine in the lovemaking situation, and we'll talk about that, because that's kind of what people love to talk about. It's an interesting thing, because when women do like say a one-off one-day workshop with me or something, and they write to me after like, wow, it's the most amazing, I've had so many incredible breakthroughs, I had the best sex of my life, so on and so forth. I'm like, well, I'm really happy for you, that's a beautiful result, but that's really the smallest part of what I have to give you. But nonetheless, we all still want to have beautiful sex. So just in talking about that dynamic between men and women and how it can start to become more and more beautiful in the lovemaking situation, is again moving away from technique, moving away from ideology, moving away from this is what the book says, step 1, 2, 3, 4, and moving away from, because a woman is not a textbook, and also moving away from the ideas of right and wrong. And starting to adapt a strong foundation inside yourself of staying present to whatever arises and being loving with that. That there is the fundamental key. So when a man and a woman come together, neither is in a doing mode. There is no goal to attain. There's nothing to achieve as such. Both the man and the woman are coming together in a receptive mode, receptive to the self and to each other. And the man brings his dynamic principle, and the woman receives that through her negative pole, which is through her receptive pole, which is the negative pole, which is the yoni. That's where she receives in. And she receives in all his dynamic energy, which if she relaxes and stays present to her feeling state inside, then that energy will naturally open and expand inside of her, reaching up into her positive pole, which is her heart, breast area, throat, all around here. And it pours back out as it transmutes through her, coming back to him as a reflection. He receives her passive energy in his heart. And so his heart is his receptive pole. That's where he receives. That's where she gives from. And so she's the one who's giving love. And he's receiving. She's the one who's giving of her receptivity in the passive way, which is her love. And that pours into the man and goes down and moves into his positive pole. So this is like a cycle. And the more that the both people can just relax inside their own body, those energies are occurring naturally. Anything you try to do can actually interrupt that, can actually override that. So if you ask me the question, how can we be in this bliss all the time? Just refrain from stopping it. The work is to start to see what are all the ways that we leak energy. We're either doing one of two things. We're either leaking or accumulating in any given situation. So we need to start to pay attention to how do we leak energy? And how have we been conditioned to be more familiar with moving around here as the living dead? A lot of women, when they first come to my workshops, they actually freak out because they start to feel energy moving through their body. And they're like, I'm trying to get rid of it. There's this feeling and I'm trying to move it. I'm trying to clear it. I'm like, it's only you trying to come home to you. We just need to get okay with staying in the body when there's a lot of energy there. And that can feel a little awkward at first, because the more you stay true to yourself, the less you're able to leak all of your energy in all your behavioral patterns, such as accommodating others, pleasing, manipulating, controlling the situations, whatever it might be. And we need to understand that all of these behaviors were actually developed by the child in us. We learned these mechanisms, if you like, as a way to survive environments as a child in order to feel like we were getting security or love. So these mechanisms are in no way like bad. They're not evil. It's just that now that you're a mature person, do you still need to be stopping life from reaching you in order to stay safe? And this is often the case. It's just that we've never really looked deeply into our behavior or into our ideas to assess if they're even still applicable. One of the things that is of most importance to me and that I'm most passionate about is really supporting women to come home to this orgasmic, blissful state as a way of being and as a spiritual path. Because really, if you look at it, without going too much into like a victim story around it, for the last few hundred years, women have really been burnt to death over their wisdom, and it's been deeply suppressed. It's something that women have felt deeply divorced from. And the feminist movement in no way was necessarily taking women closer back to an empowered state, because they demanded for equality, but the equality that they demanded from was based on the model of masculinity. And so it never did anything necessarily for the woman. It just really allowed there to be, instead of just one taxable income in the family, now there were two. And it had women getting up out of the homes and really handing the really important job of the child raising over to the government. Because now the children are being put into daycare and being subjected to and exposed to all kinds of messages coming through from the media and the government. And so it's of primary importance that the woman begins to realize that, firstly, there's a tremendous amount of support available to her, that she's not alone. I've been with so many women through this work, and the hardships that they face, the difficulties, the obstacles, the seemingly impossible wall that they face. And what I realized over these years, and also within myself, is that really all of us women struggle with basically the same thing. We all have an insane mind. And with that insane mind, we think that somehow our difficulty is an embarrassment and is something that we must hide and must let no other women know that we struggle with it. And secondly, that as children in the environment, there is a sense of only one can have success, only one can be the best. It sets up a dynamic of competition. And competition within a feminine environment is deeply destructive to the fabric that holds the integrity of that connection. So coming out of the childhood phase and into womanhood is very important for us to go through initiation stages so that we can move into the womanhood phase of our life with a level of maturity, psychological and spiritual and emotional and sexual maturity. And what this looks like is that the woman starts to realize that life is no longer about what can she get. This is a child. A child is looking around the environment and it's looking at, how can I get energy? How can I get attention? How can I get what I want when I want? And I've been told that I'm entitled to it because I'm a special little girl and I want this thing and now give it to me. And if I don't get it, I'll go off the deep end. That's fine for a child to kind of grow out of that. But in many cases, if we never go through processes that deeply address these modes of functioning, then they'll go on unchecked. And so the woman can get to 50 years old and still be functioning with this same mentality. It requires certain... You see, indigenous cultures understood this. They had initiations and sacred women's business and sacred men's business woven into the fabric of the way these cultures functioned. And these events were deeply sacred. They were upheld with the greatest respect because they understood that certain experiences were required in order for the psyche to move on to the next phase. But if we've removed these steps out of the culture, out of the fabric of our society, then we never pass through these phases. And so this mentality of a child never gets a chance to evolve. So when the woman evolves, what does that look like? It's kind of rare. We don't have a lot of examples of that. And it's for many reasons. When a woman really matures, see, a lot of women will talk about, like, I give and give and give, and I've got nothing left for me. I give all my love, and I give to my children. But this martyrdom, this sacrificing, is actually out of alignment. Because a woman can only truly give of something that is overflowing in her. Anything else that she's doing, that she's calling giving, is actually something else that has been incorrectly labeled. And this is where we have to start to look at what are our agendas and how do we manipulate ourselves in order to fulfill our agendas and so on. And this is an inquiry that's personal to each person. And these are the kinds of questions that each woman needs to ask herself in such a way that there's the willingness is to be honest with herself for herself. This is, no one can ever tell you these things. You can just be inspired. And the inspiration is so that you can come into a complete integrity with your being and live a more beautiful life. Because then these agendas have a consequence, if you like. So a mature woman starts to have the kind of attitude that she realizes that her happiness or her abundance, her wealth, her joy is directly proportional to the health, the abundance, and the joy of that which she is a part of. You could say that the woman is kind of like a drop of water in the ocean. Where does she begin? Where does she end? And where does the ocean start? She's just a part of that. So how does she keep the entire ocean functioning optimally for her own benefit? This is a very different kind of a question. And this is the kind of sisterhood that I'm interested in promoting, is how do we come together and support one another and really lift each other up without an eye of what am I going to get out of it, but actually because we realize that we all are here to share our beautiful gifts and our beautiful talents and our beauty together. That we really work better when we're all functioning optimally. Over the years, a lot of men have asked me, can I assist them? What would that look like? Women have also asked a lot, like, how do we help our men? And in my own process, what I've come to understand is that a lot of the ways that we've been influenced as women is to look at men through the perspective of the woman's agenda. So what do we want the man to be for us? But that doesn't necessarily say anything about who is he and what does he actually need? What does the male energy actually need in order to grow and thrive? What is the food for a man's energy? Or what is the food that feeds the consciousness inside of a man? Women and men grow in a kind of a different way. And it's been very natural for me to share with women because it's the process that I've been on myself. So everything that I talk about and share and take women through, I really take women into their most difficult, darkest, deepest places. And I can do that because that's where I've been in my own journey. And I know that it works. I've assisted thousands of women around the world and I've seen the results. And I'm so passionate about being able to assist more and more women with this work. The way that it assists men, and it really came out right in the start, and then it's kind of an awareness that has evolved for me. The way that the woman really can assist the man is by doing her own spiritual work, restoring her own feminine energy. Women have been really programmed to think and operate and function out of the male side in them. And our education system has raised girls this way, and our workforce relates to women this way. And all of this is deeply damaging to the woman on many levels. Her self-esteem, her enjoyment of her life, and a lot of health issues result. Especially her relationship to her menstruation. If the woman really takes care of her own spiritual work and really starts to become self-correcting, in other words, she becomes accountable. And in this accountability, what actually happens is she frees up a space between her and the man, where she gets out of the space and takes care of her own inner work. And this liberates a lot of energy for the man now to have clarity about what he needs to take care of for himself, that he wants to take care of. A lot of women come to me saying, well, he just won't do this or he just won't do that. If you are deeply in love with who you are and deeply dedicated to your spiritual work and you're restoring feminine energy and you're no longer coming at him the way his mother has come at him and crippled him, then if he is a man that is worth spending time with, he's going to do what he needs to do, governed by his own intelligence, which is something that very few men have ever been credited for. But why would a man have no intelligence? If this man really cares less about his own spiritual work and you're there opening up and flourishing and coming into a beautiful space and communicating to him how much you would really appreciate to share this journey with him, and he in no way is stepping forward toward any kind of meeting with you in there, that's a very clear sign for you that what you two have come together for has most likely come to a completion. Quite simply put, it's letting go of the attachment of what anybody else needs to do with their life for you to do what you need to do with your life. For a start, the deeper you go into your feminine, into your womanhood, and heal that and claim that and embody that, you become an embodiment of that, no longer just talking about it, but actually doing the work. That emanates a light. And that light is so attractive. It's so beautiful because the woman's natural power, her true power, not this I am a powerful woman, but her empowered state is actually that she is able to maintain a state of lovingness toward herself in all things, in all situations. In other words, it doesn't really matter what her gifts are. It matters that she can be loving while delivering them. And this is a very frightening state for many women to kind of venture toward, because a lot of women have been so mishandled and so shut down in their lives and so conditioned against their own nature to the point that really coming home to the feminine energy can be a terrifying and deeply painful, deeply confronting process. The second part is that when a woman comes into this energy, it's so beautiful that it naturally inspires the man to have a look at what he needs to take care of inside of his own process in order to be able to be around you in a way that is beneficial for you both. He needs to be clear about why he's on the planet, what his purpose is, so that when he's interacting with you, he's in alignment with his own energy. He's no longer catering to the little girl in you to get some kind of sexual favors from you. He's more interested in assisting you to become deeper and deeper in your own womanhood, more and more open, flowering more and more beautiful. But a lot of men do struggle with this, and part of the reason is because they firstly have had very little to no education around sex whatsoever. And also because our society has a lot of negative opinions towards male sexuality, in fact. So one of the reasons that men really struggle with understanding women is because of the severe lack of education that they get these days. And also coupled with the shame that is projected onto masculine sexuality. So what happens is that if our natural life force is in any way feared or repressed or oppressed, the energy still has to go somewhere. So what happens is it becomes perverted. And then it has to leak out in all kinds of perverted ways. So in times gone by, where sexuality was much more, say, natural in in cultures that were much more earth-based and had different ways of keeping the members of the community sane, sexuality was really celebrated in a very and certain initiations and rituals were held around the various phases of the sexual process that took place inside of a person. So puberty, for example, and then motherhood and so on. So for the man, what happens for him when the testosterone starts to open up and and surge through his body is that he needs outlets for this energy, and it needs to be acceptable outlets. So there was a time where when a man started to become naturally curious about sex and about women, he wanted to learn about the body. He wanted to learn about how the body works. And there would have been, say, sacred whores. And whore was originally a word that meant the holy one, and then later became bastardized into it being a derogatory term. So the whore were women that had a particular gift or natural inclination towards sexual wisdom. And they would take these young boys in their early teenage years. And I mean, like, I'm talking about puberty, you know, when they first start becoming really interested in the female body and in sex. These temples were available to these young boys, and they were taken in by these women, and they were trained in the arts of lovemaking. They were shown how to make love to a woman in a way that worked for the woman. So that by the time they came to having sex for the first time with someone that they were really, that they had a particular resonance with, they were really compatible, let's say, to this person, they were exposed, they were familiar, they knew how the female body worked, they became lovers. And this is a beautifully empowering and fortifying experience for a man to have the confidence to interact with a woman, knowing that what he's doing is actually working for her. And in the same way that when a woman came into puberty and she was ready for her first rites of sexual initiation, the aunties would come together in the tribes, and they would together decide who in this community is the most sensitive lover, he is the most wise, the most compassionate, the most gentle and talented. Who of the men could really take this woman into her first experience of sex in the most beautiful way? And ceremonies were held where the woman was, celebrated. And she was taken into her first sexual experience so that she could experience sex in a multi-orgasmic way, which is the way the female energy works. It has nothing to do with this like genital stimulation where it peaks and you're one and done, or maybe two or three. This is a very male orientation around sex. The woman's sexual energy is actually a very expansive state, and it opens up inside of her in a wave. And in this wave, she is capable of having an orgasm like every 1/8 of a second. And that can go on for hours, if not days. So it's a very different idea around what is sex for a woman as to what has been portrayed in movies and in current literature and so on. So when the two people have been introduced to sex through a deep education of how their body actually works and how beautiful it can be and what a gift it is, then when two people really like each other and they really feel very compatible together, they're coming into that relationship with a great deal of familiarity around how to interact in a way that's sane and beneficial for both people. But nothing like this occurs these days, nothing even close to it. And pornography is like all that men really have as an outlet to observe and explore and inquire about sex. But this pornography really has nothing to do with sex. It's actors. So we start to learn that sex is an act. And an act is about the furthest thing from sex. It has no foundations in connection which is all that sex is. I feel that it's really important to start to talk about these things. I've been really reluctant to share the work in this kind of public format until now, because it's so intimate, it's so personal, it's so private. And I find that through the sacredness and the safety that's created in the workshop and courses and retreats environment, that that these deeper mysteries reveal themselves within that integrity. However, I've recently become more enthused because I'm seeing more and more how confused people are and how unnecessary it is. There are just very few little things that they could start to do to really turn that around. And I'm so passionate about making myself available to women, to sisters, to really assist them to come back to what's natural and easy inside of them. And I realized that some of what we're up against is that addressing sexuality has been a very big taboo forever, practically. And so being interested in exploring your sexuality is a very brave step. And there's also a lot out there that can be very confusing. Like, well, if you want to explore sexuality, you need to go to tantra, and tantra says you need to be polyamorous, or so on and so forth, or, you know, weird sex orgies, or join a cult, or there can be a lot of confusing and misleading information. And the main way that I like to work is really just to support the woman to have a deep experience of her own energy, because that becomes the guiding force for her to know what is right for her as to how to proceed in this spiritual process. I also think that it's very important just to start sharing this more publicly so that we can just dispel the taboos and the myths that have surrounded sexuality that have us unnecessarily traumatized. And just the most obvious one that I've noticed is that in times recently gone by, in my mother's generation and her mother's generation, the attitude of the day was, you know, if there is a problem, don't talk about it and it will go away. Ignore it. But what happens is it has to go somewhere. So what happens is it gets suppressed. And whatever we refuse to deal with in this life that is on our table to deal with, whatever spiritual work we have to do that we neglect, it simply just gets passed on through the generations from womb to womb. And it is from each womb that humanity is born. So it is from the womb of woman that all of, not only humanity, but all of the conditions that are upheld, the patriarch, in fact, is passed on from womb to womb. So this is why I'm so dedicated to working with women, because when we understand the power that we actually have inside of us that's there and learn how to use it in alignment with ourselves, this womb can then be a profound mechanism available to birthing conditions that are truly worth celebrating. It's becoming increasingly important to me to start to share some sanity around this, and also to really help women realize that, you know, they're really not alone, that there really is a tremendous amount of support available to you. I function in a total global capacity. And the main thing that I see that's important is that, like I mentioned earlier, we've never really had, like, what does a female spirituality path really look like, and what is required. And a lot of the spiritual paths that are offered, like yoga, meditation, vipassana, so on, they're beautiful, they're powerful, they're amazing, but a lot of them address the masculine needs. And so if a woman's going into those environments, but she has a lot of stress, or she has a lot of trauma, let's say, or she's coming with a lot of conditioning, she's very shut down, those practices can actually be even compound inside of her in a particular way that don't necessarily assist what she needs as spiritual food. The woman's spiritual path is really built into the everyday life. It has to be, because that's where she is. She's in the home. She's with the children. These are her domains naturally, because they come from her. They come from her body. The earth is her home. She's very closely connected to the earth. So this orgasmicness is very much, you know, song, dance, vibrancy, beauty, art. All of these things are spiritual practices for a woman, and especially a practice like the yoni yoga bliss therapy that opens up these bliss states, because what it does is removes stuckness in the body. It removes blockages, trauma, so on, so that that's free for her to then go deeper into herself. A natural silence arises when she's at peace in herself. She can never come to the silence through force. And most of our Western programming is quite forceful. And it's quite body image orientated. So she needs something that is actually going to assist to break down all of these myths and all of these lies and all of these conditioning of the environment of which she's in. But when the woman starts to really open up orgasmically, she may find herself up against the societal conditioning of what's acceptable and okay. Now, I'm in no way saying, well, she needs to just be full on and in everyone's face. No. But at the same time, I just want to give her the support and encouragement that it's okay for you to be who you are naturally. And that will be the most beautiful gift you can give to everyone around you.